there, it's Mitzi. Welcome to my channel. I wanted to hop on here because I have 4 books I've read and hadn't talked about. And I don't like to have too many on my stack to talk about because then it just takes too long. And sometimes I forget about some of them. I forget details that I want to share with you when I get on here. So, which I still do that even if it's one book. You know, I have all these ideas as I'm reading these books. I'm like, oh, I want to mention that when I talk to the viewers about this book, and then it goes out the window. I sit down and then I can't even remember how to talk. So it's just different when you're behind the camera. But anyway, I did finish 4 books, and so I want to talk about those to give you just a little update on what I've been reading lately. Now, 3 of these books were for the Retro Romance hosted by Storm over at Storm Reads and Sarah over at The Bookish Knitter. I had a great time participating. I'm not the biggest on romance category kind of romance books, but I do like to pick them up from time to time. And I do have a lot of Grace Livingston Hill that I found recently. And since she was a romance writer, and I do love her, I've been reading more romances because of that. So I wanted to participate because she certainly fit the bill for a retro romance. So I'll talk about that in a minute. But the first one I read for retro romance was a little short story collection. And I picked this up at a little store in Rock Hill called, I think it's called the Liberty Bookstore, and it's great. If you're ever around Rock Hill, South Carolina, stop by. I'm pretty sure it's, if you put in Liberty Bookstore, I'm sure it'll come up. But it was the cutest little bookstore, and they had a whole section of middle grade and children's books, and this was in there, and it was the cutest little cover. I just love it, and it just spoke to me because these were the kind of books, you know, I picked up as a young girl in like middle school. These are the kind of books I picked up. This is called First Love, and there's 14, it says, warm and glowing stories, and they're all little romances for preteens, and it was just the sweetest little thing. This book was actually published in, let's see, 1963. And it was published by Scholastic. It was a Scholastic book, which of course I love because I'm all into the Scholastic books. It was 45 cents, y'all. It's on the cover. But they all came from magazines. I think each one of the stories were featured in different magazines. This one says one of them was featured in 1950, 1956. This one goes as far back as 1938. So they're old little short stories, romances, sweet little romances for preteen age. So these were considered young adult at the time. Now I think they would be considered more middle grade. But I loved them. They were super sweet. I will say though, it was a variety. Of course, there were some that I enjoyed more than others. One really surprised me though, because I was like, wait a minute. You know, when I read this title. The title was Ipecac, and it was by Kurt Vonnegut Jr. And I thought, that just didn't seem right for Kurt Vonnegut Jr. to be writing a little preteen sweet romance, short story. So anyway, that surprised me. But when I read the story, I understood because it's more of a sci-fi type story. It's not what I would consider the rest of these little stories are. Anyway, I enjoyed the story, and it really reminded me of a Twilight Zone episode. And if you follow my channel, you know I love the Twilight Zone. It's my favorite show. It's the black and white version from the 1960s. That's the one with Rod Serling. And there's one particular episode where this, it's a huge computer that takes up the whole room. You know, when computers first came on the scene, they were huge. And this man kind of trains the computer, and they start communicating with one another using numbers. And so the computer starts taking on human characteristics, and then there becomes a problem because it's helping him date this lady that works down the hall, and then it's jealous. I think it's called For the Love of Agnes or something like that. But anyway, the story Ipecac, which is in here, reminded me a whole lot of that Twilight Zone episode. But the problem is, I don't think that it said anything about Ipecac, Kurt Vonnegut Jr. So I don't know who influenced who, but somebody watched the Twilight Zone or read the story, or vice versa. But anyway, very similar story, and it didn't really fit these, but I did enjoy it because I do like the Twilight Zone. But my favorite, I think, in here, there were some that were just really sweet. My favorite was, what was it called? It's called Blue Valentine by Mary Gibbons, and it says, Angelo found the wrong gift for the right girl. And that one was such a surprise and so sweet because of his intentions. It was the sweetest little Valentine, and I loved it. But some of the stories were really kind of sad. And so I usually I expect a romance to have this happy ending. These did not. I mean, some of them did. Some of them were really sweet and happy endings, but some of them were heartbreaking. So it was a mix, but I did enjoy reading these, and I enjoyed reading all of them. But like I say, that one story, Ipecac by Kurt Vonnegut Jr., I just thought, what in the world is this? Because it just doesn't fit this, the rest of these stories. But anyway, I did enjoy this, and I will pick this up again because I do like those old vintage sweet stories. And then I picked up, and that was for spring because we were reading the seasons, and I wanted to try to read one for every season, and I ended up reading 3. So I read this one for spring because it looked like spring prom to me, and then this one for summer is called Voices in Summer by Rosamund Pilcher. And this was not very long for a Rosamund Pilcher. A lot of those are a lot longer, but this one wasn't long. This reminded me of D.E. Stevenson. The way this was written reminded me a lot of a D.E. Stevenson. And if you follow my channel, you know I love a good D.E. Stevenson. So I really enjoyed this. This surrounds the story of a girl who is married and they're distant. It's I read it for a category romance kind of book, and it is a romance because it is about a marriage, but they aren't together most of the book, so that makes it a little more complicated. Anyway, the woman has to have surgery, and so she goes to stay with her husband's relatives, and she's never met these relatives before. So he goes off on this vacation while she goes and recovers from surgery, which I didn't like that choice, first of all. But anyway, it just showed that they just were distant and they had some misunderstandings. They loved one another, but there were some misunderstandings in this marriage. And so by going to stay with these relatives, she learns more about her husband because he had been previously married and had a daughter, but he never talked about that part of his life. He never talked about his ex-wife or his daughter for that matter. And so she wanted to know more about them, but she was, I don't know, it was kind of like she was insecure in their relationship, and she was afraid to ask those kind of questions. And so he never shared and she never asked. So on this as she's recuperating from this surgery, she goes and stays with some of his relatives. I think they're in Cornwall. And she learns more about herself. She builds some confidence in herself, which I loved. And she also learns more about his past relationship with his daughter. And so I really enjoyed this. Again, it reads like a D.E. Stevenson, and so you can't go wrong with that. I do love Rosamund Pilcher, and actually right now I'm reading Coming Home by Rosamund Pilcher. This was an accident. I had chosen to read this one for my big book summer because it's like 800 pages, I think. I'm about halfway done. I had stopped for retro romance to read this one because it had the word summer in it, and I thought I could use it for my summer book for retro romance. So I did stop this one to read this book, but now I've started back and I am really enjoying that book too. So looks like I'm going to be reading back to back some Rosamund Pilcher. So anyway, that was a great one and I did enjoy that. And then for my fall, I didn't get to. I had it on my nightstand, but for some reason, this cover called to me, and it was my winter choice. And it is a Grace Livingston Hill, and it's called Stranger Within the Gates. And this is actually a Christmas book. I didn't realize it, but it takes place at Christmas time. It's a holiday time. And this was different from the Grace Livingston Hill I normally read. This was the villain in this story was pretty nasty. I mean, this girl was just not nice at all. It's about a woman she's a widow, and she's trying to raise her children. They're all pretty much older. Most of them are in college or high school, so they're older kids. And one of them, at the very beginning of the story, she receives a letter from her son who is in college that he has married someone. They don't know anything about the girl. You know, he has not even been dating this girl. And so they are like, what in the world? And then they come home for the holidays. So they come home for Christmas, and it really just disrupts this whole family and their traditions. And not only their traditions for Christmas, but just how they are as a family and their values and things, because she is totally opposite this family, and she's just a nasty, nasty person. She's just not wanting to be there, and she lets them know it. She doesn't hold her tongue. There's this one scene with these pajamas she wears, and oh my goodness, it was the funniest, funniest thing. And that's what I will remember, I think, most from this story, is the way that she dressed to come down for breakfast. I just thought, oh my goodness, this girl. But anyway, I did enjoy it. It was not my favorite Grace Livingston Hill, but I did love that it was a Christmas book, and I did enjoy this interesting villain. I think this was a pretty interesting character, so I did enjoy that. And so those were the books that I read for retro romance. And then on a whim, I read A Murder, She Wrote, and this was The Murder of Sherlock Holmes. This one was written by James Anderson. And this is technically the first Murder, She Wrote, because it is based on the pilot episode of Murder, She Wrote. And it's just, I think the show had come out, and then they created this little book based on that pilot episode. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I watched Murder, She Wrote. Mama liked watching that, so we would watch it together. And we didn't watch it all the time, so I don't remember that many episodes, but I do remember Mama liking it, and, you know, I enjoyed watching it with her. And so last year, there was a readathon of Murder, She Wrote, so I picked one up just on a whim from the library, and I thought, you know what, I like Murder, She Wrote, I'm going to read one of those. So I checked one out from the library, and it was based in Savannah, Georgia, and I loved it because I was familiar with Savannah, so I knew all the places she mentioned in the book. And I knew then that I was going to read some more. Well, a week or so ago, well, it's been several weeks now, I was flipping through the TV, and I found that I had free episodes of Murder, She Wrote. So I started it and thought, you know what? I'm not going to watch this. I'm going to see if they have this, because someone had told me they had a few of the episodes made into books. And so I found the book, and I had to hunt this down, but I found a used copy of the book, and I read it, and then I went back and watched the pilot episode. I think it's a two-parter. I think there was 2 parts to it, and it was so much fun. I loved this one. In this particular one, if you're not familiar with Murder, She Wrote, it's about a girl named Angela Lansbury, who we know and love. She played the main character, who is the amateur sleuth who solves the crime in these novels. And in this particular one, we're introduced to her as Jessica Fletcher. That's her name. And I actually saved this to share this because it sounds like Miss Marple to me. It said, Jessica Fletcher was a widow in her mid-50s. She was energetic, intelligent, intensely interested in people, and had the happy knack of being able to get on easily with folk of every age and social background. She had a strong sense of justice, a deep dislike of sham in any form, an ever-present urge to help those who needed it, and a belief in speaking her mind. And then it goes on to talk about some other things about how she dressed in tweed suits and sweaters, and that she worked as a substitute English teacher from time to time as well. And in this particular book, we find out that she has written this novel, and her nephew finds it, and he takes it to a publisher without her knowing it, and he wants to publish it. So she goes to New York. Jessica Fletcher goes to New York to see about getting this book published, and it happens to be a murder mystery. And so she's going on this little tour introducing her. She gets it published. And so she's going on this little tour. While she's there, a murder takes place at a party that she's invited to by the publisher. And the man is dressed as Sherlock Holmes because it is a costume party. And so they find Sherlock Holmes in the pool. He's drowned, but that's not what's happened to him. And so we find out, more and more as we go. It is a lot like a Miss Marple. Of course, I love that. And I love Jessica Fletcher. I like her as a character. And so I'm excited to read these. I already have the second one, which is based on another episode. I think the first few are based on episodes. Let me know in the comments, because I know some of you have read a lot of these. But I was trying to do a little research, and it seems like most of the books are just based on Jessica Fletcher, but not the show. So let me know, because I'm thinking that the first few are the episodes. So what I want to do is read those if I can find them, because they're actually not that easy to come by, these first ones. And then watch those episodes while I can get it for free online. So let me know in the comments if you've read any of the Murder, She Wrote books, and let me know if you have one that's your favorite too, because there are a gazillion of those books, and I'm not going to read them in order. I'm going to try to read the first 4 in order, because I think those are episodes, like I said. But the others, I'm not going to try to read in order. So let me know if you have a favorite that you think I would enjoy. So those are the books I've been reading right now. Again, I'm reading Coming Home by Rosamund Pilcher. Loving it for Big Book Summer. And I have a couple of others on my nightstand that I'm picking up as well. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these or what you're reading, and so we can chat there. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.